Come to Blackpool, you won't feel isolated.
Well, yeah.
And that's one of the real strengths of it. And, if people go away fired up to think, I'm not alone, I'm just sort of plugging away in my little area where the Lord has called me to serve. And it does feel hard sometimes. It does feel like, to use those words from Zechariah 4, a day of small things. Or even, again, Zechariah 4, we're up against some mighty mountains. You'll go away from the conference thinking, yes, but the Lord is greater than those things and joins us together.
Hello and welcome to Independence, the FIEC podcast. I am Joel Murray, the Media and Communications Officer at FIEC, and Adrian normally hosts this, but you're on the other side today.
I am on the other side, yes.
Explain who are you?
Hello, Joel and everybody. I am the Head of National Ministries for FIEC, and one of my responsibilities is the Leaders Conference, which is what we're going to talk about today, I think.
Yeah.
So you've never been to the Leaders Conference, have you, Joel? I think
haven't.
It's going to be a new experience for you.
I've seen about it. I was so close.
So you had the regional ones last year. We did 5 regional conferences in different places. Did you enjoy those?
I loved it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you imagine that on a larger scale,
all of those merged into one
with even better food.
Oh yeah.
You've basically got the National Leaders Conference.
Although the food is pretty good.
It was pretty well. It depends which venue you went to. So don't write in, but some of the venues are better than others. It's fair to say. But yeah,
I did look it up. As of the day we're recording, won't be quiet when we publish. 153 days to go.
Someone I saw this week who is a pastor in a church said basically his whole year is geared up towards, he was just a bit tongue-in-cheek, but he said his whole year is geared up towards November. He's thinking about 7th to 9th November and the Leaders Conference. And obviously we're excited about it, and we hope that other people will be excited about it too.
Yeah, and it's going to be in Blackpool at the Winter Gardens.
It is going to be in Blackpool. Winter Gardens, very famous venue, and you're probably sort of thinking slightly old and tired maybe. But actually, they've got a brand new conference centre that we're making use of.
Great.
And so the Blackpool Winter Gardens is an iconic venue, but we're in the new bit. Well, a little bit of the old bit, but mainly in the new bit. And it's an exciting place to be, actually.
You can tell us more about it in a minute.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
Gonna get there.
I am excited about Blackpool.
Yeah, and 2022 is 100 years of FIEC. So there's something of that going on.
And in fact, November, it was actually November 1922 that the FIEC was formed. Great. So November 2022 will actually mark the 100th anniversary of the FIEC. That's right.
Yeah, cool. So let's kick off. I know a little bit about the Leaders Conference because I've been working here for a while, but never been yet. Let's say someone knows nothing about the FIEC Leaders Conference. Who is it for, and why should they come? So
it's for anybody who has a leadership responsibility in an FIEC church, and actually people who are in churches like FIEC churches. Perhaps they're thinking of joining, or they're closely associated with us. They'd be very welcome as well. And we draw leadership quite broadly. So we'd love for pastors to be there, but we'd love for spouses to come as well, for elders who we think have a really important part to play in church life, for people who have other leadership responsibilities. They might be perhaps leading small groups, or a women's ministry, or a youth ministry, or a seniors ministry, or perhaps serving as a deacon or an administrator, all kinds of different leadership roles being exercised in the church. And we long actually the conference would be for all kinds of leaders. It's not just a pastors' conference, it's a leaders' conference.
Yeah, so it's almost possible for someone who maybe considers himself a lay leader. Yeah,
so I mean, Joel, it's interesting. You're at Avenue Community Church in Leicester. You don't have a formal role, I don't think, as a leader, but you're helping lead small groups and Sunday school and from the front. So I think you would be, an ideal person. Actually, would say if you were able to come along. I realise it's midweek, so it means if you're working, obviously, and you've got young families and things, it's a little bit tricky. But if you're able to come, and I would have said to you, Joel, if you were still working for Lincoln City Council, as you used to do, if you were able to come, you'd be really welcome.
Yeah, Monday to Wednesday, isn't it? So
it's a Monday to Wednesday, 7th to 9th of November, 2022, in Blackpool, which is not Torquay.
No, so it used to be in Torquay. I heard a lot about Torquay.
Well, we were in Torquay for 3 years. Torquay was great for us because it was a venue that could accommodate us all and was reasonably priced, because we want to be able to eat together. That's really important.
Okay, eating together. Why is that important?
It's important because a conference is like our Leaders Conference is not just about the stuff you get in. in terms of from the front or from a seminar, whatever it may be. It's actually also about the connections that you make. It's about friendships that you make and sustain. And we believe it's a good biblical principle to do that over a meal. Yeah. So actually, right from the outset, when we started planning these leaders conferences in this sort of phase of our life, we wanted them to include meals that we sat down at together. So we have 4 meals that we sat down. So Monday evening, Tuesday lunchtime, Tuesday evening, Wednesday lunchtime. So not breakfast, but other meals. We sit down together and we eat. We have plenty of time to eat and talk, meet up with people. And that's a really important component. And of course, when you factor that into it, it puts the price up at lots of venues and makes... So we've looked at places like, for example, Harrogate Conference Centre, which all looks very smart and nicely middle class, which might suit some people, but hopelessly out of reach. Torquay was great. It was affordable and good food, and it accommodated us. They've made some changes to Torquay over the last year. They've converted some of the rooms we used into other use as a gym and another kind of room. And so there was just not the space for us.
Yeah.
So when we looked at Blackpool, we didn't just do it so that people in Liverpool could come, although people in Liverpool will be delighted that they're now very near the conference. Yeah. So we realised it will be further for some, but actually for most people it's about the same distance or even nearer. And it's got lots of accommodation for us to use. We're able to sit and eat together. If you've ever seen the Winter Gardens on television,
isn't it where they do the dancing?
They do dancing there. We're in the massive ballroom, the Empress Ballroom, which is enormous, and that will seat everybody for food. Wow. It's extraordinary. So it's just there's a buzz about that.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things I think about the Leaders Conference, Joel, is we often feel small and alone, don't we?
Yeah.
Even when the church is in reasonably good health, actually we're just a drop in the ocean. I think of our church. We live in a town of 25,000 people. If 10% of those went to church on Sunday morning, that's 2,500 people. So suddenly our little church, we're just under 100. We look pretty small in some ways, and actually being with lots of other Christian leaders is just a reminder that the Lord is doing something, the Lord is at work. There's a solidarity, there's a real sense of togetherness and fellowship in that, and that's a really important part of the conference.
And when I was in Lincoln, we were at TCM Baptist Church. I think it was the only FIEC church for about 40-mile radius or something like that. Right. And it totally feels super isolated. Yeah.
Come to Blackpool, you won't feel isolated. Well, and that's one of the real strengths of it. And if people go away fired up to think, I'm not alone, I'm just sort of plugging away in my little area where the Lord has called me to serve, and it does feel hard sometimes. It does feel like to use those words from Zechariah 4, a day of small things, or even, again, Zechariah 4, we're up against some mighty mountains. You'll go away from the conference thinking, yes, but the Lord is greater than those things and joins us together.
Yeah, and those little conversations and stories will be very encouraging. I think that's one thing I've really enjoyed working at FIEC and meeting different church leaders and hearing just the little things that are happening. This person came to our church and and they've grown. It's really encouraging. So.
And I think, I would say to people who come to the conference, come prepared to share those stories with others. Yeah. Because actually, if you want to make the most of the conference, especially if you're coming for the first time, the conference mentality we have, I think, is very much what can I get out of it? And I think actually one of the great things to do with a conference like this is not just to ask that question, what will I get out of it, but how can I help others? So actually, I'd want to say to FIEC leaders, if you don't come, we'll be poorer for you not being there. Yeah. Not because we want to make the numbers up and we want to cover our backs in terms of the money. Of course, we want to do those things. That's important. But actually, there's a real solidarity in just sharing those stories, talking about the things that are encouraging us and challenging us and serving one another. It's that one anothering, actually, which is at the real heart of the fellowship of FIEC. Yeah.
So those meal times, how many people are going to be having lunch together?
Well, we think probably about 1,000.
Wow. That's great.
So there are some queues. Yeah. But they do that pretty well.
Conversation times.
They know what they're doing. So, looking forward to it.
So if I'm on my own, I don't really know many other church leaders maybe right there. I'm the only one from my church who's come. There's 1,000 people all sitting down having conversations. What do you think? Where do I start? Any advice, tips for me?
Well, people are very friendly for a start. Yeah. So I think that's one of the great things about going to a Christian conference, and people are generally very welcoming. And you can say to someone, do you mind if I sit here? You'll immediately have a rapport with them. They're working in a similar kind of church with the same theological convictions. Sometimes you go to events, you're slightly hedging around people. Are you an evangelical or not? I'm not sure. You're sort of hedging around where people are, but there's immediately a solidarity from coming to the Leaders Conference. We start with the main session, so you can sort of start to feel at home, and you'll sing songs and you'll hear preaching. that sounds like preaching and will help you and encourage you. I think there are one or two things especially you can do. We produce a conference app which gets released a few weeks before the conference, and that's a way of seeing who else is there and making connections with people. So even if you're coming for the first time, there's bound to be someone you know. And actually we encourage people to pre-arrange some of those meetups. Maybe say, let's meet up for the first meal or something like that. So if you're coming on your own and coming for the first time, look out for someone that you know and make a connection with them beforehand, really to make the most of it.
Yeah. You mentioned we start off with a session gathering all together first off to kind of settle in. Yep. You've just been finalising the content and who's speaking.
Yes, it's all done now as of this morning. So hence this podcast. So there's different kinds of things going on. So we've got from the front sessions, and we're framing it all in the book of Jude. Actually, we find that really helpful. And that's not least because Jude explains very carefully, I think, that the ministry we do at the moment, church life at the moment, is set in the context of the last days. And we've got to keep reminding ourselves of that we are in the last days, and actually judgment is coming. It's quite sobering, but it's important to see that context for ministry today. And so John Stevens is going to kick us off, our national director, looking at Jude 1-16 and just the very important section there is there. And then we're going to end, it's sort of Jude is bookending it really. We're going to end with Julian Hardiman on the last day. He's going to preach from the doxology, which is a beautiful, wonderful, moving doxology in Jude. Julian actually and Debbie, his wife, Julian's a pastor at Eden Baptist Church in Cambridge. Yeah. They're hoping to go out into the mission field soon into 2023. Plans are still being developed, but that's the plan. And Julian and Debbie have both served in FIEC churches. Julian's the pastor of one, and he's served on the trust board for many years, been a really faithful servant, very dear to many of us. And we thought actually the best way to honour him as they take this major step is to say, come and preach to us. Not to do sort of big fanfare or anything like that, but actually we want to hear you preach God's word to us. So Julian wonderfully is going to do the doxology for us on Wednesday. So we're bookending it with Job. Yeah. With Jude, sorry. I was Job. I got Job on the head.
And what's the kind of overall message? What are we aiming to try and help people to leave with afterwards?
We do want to acknowledge that it's 100 years of the FIEC. Yeah. We want to be thankful for that, but we don't want to turn it into a nostalgia trip. Don't think that's very helpful. But interestingly, the three founding principles essentially on which the FIEC was formed were the idea of being doctrinally orthodox and having that at its heart. And in 1922, that was a really big thing because so many churches were losing way with the gospel. And actually, even today, that's still the case. Doctrinal orthodoxy is really very much at the heart of the challenge for evangelicals, and it's the heart of what FIEC is. So that founding principle remains the same. Second founding principle was a commitment to evangelism and to reaching out with the gospel. Again, a great need in 1922, a great need in 2022. So we want to recommit ourselves to that. And then also, rather quaintly, the FIEC was described as a society of mutual helpfulness. We want to be able to support one another, help one another, partner with one another. That was a founding principle. We're independents. We recognise that one of the besetting sins of independency can be isolationism. And so the idea of having a fellowship is a way of mitigating against that, fighting against it. And that still is relevant today. So actually, we're going to have three platform sessions where we explore those themes, where we give thanks for them historically, and we work out exactly what they mean for us today and how important they are for us going forward. How do we need to commit ourselves to doctrinal orthodoxy? Paul Mallard's going to help us with that.
Okay, who's Paul Mallard?
So Paul Mallard is just in the process of retiring from Bath. It's gone out of my head. Whitcomb Baptist Church, thank you, in Bath, and previously been at Wood Green in Worcester. Again, as a member of the trust board. So all our speakers this year are from FIEC churches. We're trying to do it, kind of say we've got all this wisdom and knowledge internally. We want to make use of that. So Paul Mallard's going to help us with that. It's clear thinking theologian as well. So he's going to help us think about doctrinal orthodoxy, reflecting a little bit on the past, but also just how important it is to stick with that going into the future. Then Andy Patterson is going to, sorry, these aren't in order now. Andy Hunter, let me do him first. Andy Hunter, who's our director for Scotland, has been a pastor in Scotland and is an elder at an FIEC church. He's going to help us think about partnership, the F of fellowship. Yeah. Really, what is it? And why is it so important today? It was obviously important back in 1922, but 2022, why is it such a key element for us, and how do we pursue it in a godly and helpful way? And then Andy Patterson, who's retiring this year as our mission director, is going to be helping us think about outreach and evangelism, and again really calling us back to this work of sharing the good news of Christ with all those who desperately need to hear it.
Yeah, so Jude is thinking about the last days, and then we're kind of digging into what does it mean for independent churches. What should we be looking at? What should be important during those last days
and those,
for ministry?
Those themes actually do appear in Jude as well, to a greater or lesser extent. The idea of partnership is tackled negatively actually in Jude. What happens when there isn't partnership? What happens when there's division? Doctrinal orthodoxy. And to a lesser extent, this sort of commitment to gospel outreach is not so clear in Jude, but in many ways those themes are there. Yeah. And so actually we're rooting ourselves in Jude over the period of the 3 days. Yeah.
And there's seminars as well to get involved
so
in, is that right?
We normally have lots of seminars. It's beginning to sound like it's a packed program.
Yeah.
But there is lots of space. There's not only meal times, but actually one set of the seminars, we say, they're optional. If you'd like to come to them, do come to them. Everything is recorded so you can access it later. But actually, if you need to find time just to hang out with mates and things, do that. And in fact, by the way, one of the ways to really make the most of the time is to come earlier on Monday and meet up with some mates in town, or stay later. Don't book your train home. We finish at just after lunch on Wednesday, but don't book your train home until 5, for example. Have an afternoon with mates watching the Illuminations, because the Illuminations will be on. So the seminars, we normally have 3 sets of seminars. This year we're only having 2, and then we're doing something a little bit different, which I'll explain in a moment. First set of seminars are responding to the partnership question, the doctrinal orthodoxy. So you have to excuse me if I consult my notes, because I can't quite remember everything.
I'll forgive you.
But we've put together a set of seminars, and I think the test is always, would I like to go to every one? And the answer is yes. I have to say that, but I genuinely would like to go to every one. And each one, I think, is just tackling slightly different topics. So Robert Strivens, who's a pastor in Bradford upon Avon and was the principal of London Seminary, is going to be helping us think about independency as a movement, not only historically, but how's it been shaped historically and what's its relevance today. I think our confidence in independency is sometimes shaken a little bit, and Robert's just going to help us regain some of that independency, seeing that it isn't a quirk of history. Actually, it's a thought-through position, especially in terms of how it relates to the state and our place within the nation, all those sorts of things. He's going to help us think about that. Very excited about that. Graham Bynon is who's a pastor in Cambridge and teaches part-time as well as a director of Free Church Ministry at Oak Hill. He's going to help us think a little bit about what are some of the current challenges facing the church, especially in terms of the doctrine of the church. So we're independents, but actually we're always facing challenges. We have our own besetting sins that we need to stand up against, and he's going to help us with that. Sharon James is going to do something on engaging on issues in an unbelieving world. Sharon is married to Bill. She works for Christian Institute, and she'll just help us think about what's some of the current issues and how do we engage on them in a way that's helpful and careful and clear. And I think most of us know there are some really pressing issues coming along, so I think that's important. So I've almost finished on the first lot of seminars. Then Rachel Sloan and Paul Rees are going to do something on complementarianism, which is one of the ethos statements of the FIEC, and one of the ones that people always have lots of questions about. They're going to help us not only define it, we're reasonably good at defining it, but think about how does it work out in practice. And I think that's really important to have actually, they're both at Charlotte Chapel. Paul's the senior pastor, Rachel's the women's worker there. She's also our director of women's ministry. So together they'll be able to give us a really good insight into how it works in practice. And then we've also got a couple of seminars on how you develop local partnerships, national partnerships, how that works in practice. And then one final thing, Colin Adams, who's a pastor in Scotland, is going to help us think through about how you maintain unity in a very complex world, thinking especially of within the local church. Because I think, Joel, one of the things that people have found, and maybe you found this, I don't know, at Avenue, maybe not, over the last 2.5 years, we've had more disagreements within church just about how to do things, live stream or not live stream, meet together, don't meet together, follow the rules, don't follow all these kind of questions. There's just a little bit more friction in church life than there has been in the past. And we want to explore that and say, the world is complicated, and there will be different views on some things. So how do you maintain unity in the church in the context of all of that?
And pastors and leaders are hitting the brunt of that, aren't they? Because they're just
I think that's right.
That's
right. And I think actually, interestingly, leadership teams are for the first time finding there's some quite sharp disagreements in leadership teams.
Wow, yeah.
So it's one thing managing unity in the church, keeping everybody together as you're leading the church as a team of leaders. But actually, when even there's disagreement within a team about how to approach things, how do you resolve that? And Colin's going to be a real help with that kind of stuff.
Good.
So that's the morning seminars. So I don't know if any of those catch your attention. Do you want to come to them all?
I will be at them all. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think it might be part of my job to try and at least get a little snippet. I'll be on the tweets and the
we will
Instagrams
record them all.
Yeah.
Seminars don't always record brilliantly. Depends how interactive they are.
Sure.
But we'll try and make all the material available. They're all really important subjects to be wrestling with. And actually, if you're coming with a leadership team, here's an idea. Why don't you say, let's split
up.
So, one go to one go to another, and then in the car home or afterwards, you can have a conversation. What did you learn? What's applicable to us?
Notes. Yeah. And I'll probably be listening through them to try and get them onto the website afterwards. So I will hopefully be able to get to all of them. Okay. But then, of course, you can reshare. Maybe you can, if the one really stuck out, you split your team. One stuck out. Okay, let's all listen to this one again and then discuss it as a team later. That would work. Yeah.
And those as well, Joel, they're for all kinds of leaders. So they're not just pastor issues. They're for anybody who's interested in the health of the church would want to go along to any of those really, because we all have a hand to play. In the afternoon, we're doing something different. So in the afternoon, we have what we call optional seminars, which is to say, if you want to do other things, don't feel bound to come. But we're going to tackle some subjects which are really not hot potatoes, perhaps it's not the way to describe them, but just things that we're trying to think through at the moment as churches and trying to come to a settled conclusion on some really important subjects.
Sound exciting and controversial.
Yeah, well, some maybe, some not. So first of all, let me tell you what the seminars are, and then there's a couple of other tracks that are going on in the afternoon. So Phil Swan, who's a pastor in Llanelli in South Wales, who's done a lot of work about working with trauma victims, is going to help us think about how essentially to minister to traumatized people. So a lot of the abuse that happens in church, this is an insight from Diane Langberg and from Phil himself actually, a lot of the abuse that happens in church is re-abusing people who are already been abused. And we need to be very clear, how do you pastor to traumatize people? I think we're not very good at that, to be honest. So we wanted to address that. So he's going to do a seminar on that. That's really exciting. I think really important topic. John Stevens is going to do something on critical race theory and cultural Marxism, which are topics which are real hot topics. What should we be thinking about them as Christians? And not everyone will necessarily agree, but it's an important subject we need to engage with and be thinking through clearly. So he's going to help us with that.
Yeah, because someone maybe in the church will be thinking about this and they might have a particular thing, and if we're not prepared.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there is a certain culture that's going on at the moment. And so we do need to understand that. And as leaders, we do need to know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
Both reactively, as you're describing, how we react to people in the church, but also proactively, how we lead the church. So I think that's important. Mike Kendall is going to do something on finding the right hills to die on, which is a title we've borrowed really from an Ortland book, which is, I think, we're always challenged and trying to think clearly about what are primary issues, what are secondary issues, what are tertiary issues, how can we work together, how do we choose what fits into those categories. And actually that's essentially at the heart of what FIEC is. Mike's just finishing up a term serving as the Trust Board Chairman, and he's pastor of St Neots Evangelical Church. So actually he's going to be a great help just on helping us think, how do we define what some of those issues are. I think that's really important. And then Jonathan Bond, who's our director for smaller churches, is doing a seminar on the joys and challenges of serving in a smaller church. So a significant number of FIEC churches have a membership less than 35. And that brings with it a certain number of opportunities and joys, but also a number of challenges. And he's going to help us think through that. And again, if you're serving in a smaller church, that would be a really important session to attend. And then one last one in terms of seminars, Richard and Carolyn Lacey are going to do something on how to develop a healthy leadership culture. So we've seen a lot of abuse cases. We've seen a lot of stuff written diagnostically about abusive leadership, which we want to acknowledge. We want to say we've got to not just diagnose what's wrong, we've got to say, how do we remedy it? And the way that you remedy it is by, from the outset, developing healthy leadership cultures in church. And Richard and Carolyn are going to help us through with that, which would be excellent. And then running alongside that in the afternoon, we have 3 tracks, or 2 drop-ins and 1 track. So one track for women in ministry. It's really important to value women in ministry. So whether that's wives of those who are serving or people who have specific roles in the church. And Eleanor and Rachel, who are our 2 directors for women's ministry, are going to be leading a track with women. They're going to have lunch together and then have some teaching and time together. That's really important to acknowledge the role that women play in our churches. And then 2 drop-ins, one with ECS, Edward Connor Solicitors, who are going to provide a drop-in in terms of providing practical help and things for churches on some of those sort of, boring but important topics that people are always thinking about, policies and recruitment and HR and governance, all those sorts of things. And then we're also going to run a drop-in for elders and their wives. And Ray and Jenny Evans, Ray works part-time for the FIEC and then is just retiring as pastor of Grace Community Church in Bedford. He's going to run and host together with Jenny, a drop-in for elders and wives. We'd love elders and wives to come along. So I don't know, how many elders are there at Avenue?
5.
So I mean, some of them will have full-time jobs, some won't. But if they were able, we'd love both elders and their wives to feel very welcome at the Leaders Conference. And one of the ways we're going to do that is have a drop-in just to say hello, come and meet us. Some of the other FI staff will be there as well, just to say hello.
And especially those elders and potentially the wives can feel quite isolated, and actually meeting others in those situations can be really helpful.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the Tuesday.
Whoa, we're not even halfway through yet.
Yeah, it's important to say, we think it's important to come to the main session, certainly, but actually you must use the conference in a way that serves you. So there is this idea of serving others, but actually you must use it in a way that serves you. Yeah. And actually, if you just need to go for a long walk, I'm an introvert. So what I've just described to you is an introvert's nightmare in some ways. So, if you need an hour just to go and walk along the seafront, donkeys have gone, so you can't have a donkey ride, but you can go and admire the lights or whatever, just get some fresh air. You must feel free to do that. And it's not attend all sessions kind of conference. It's come and be encouraged, come and encourage others. Use it as best serves you, really.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's so much experience that is coming in. The people doing the main plenary sessions and the people doing the seminars. Yeah, it's really valuable to make the most of that. And that's what FIEC is about. It is helping each other through experience, and then the more mature, the more experienced.
Some of these people won't thank you for calling them older, I think that's exactly right. And I think we're realizing that within our network of 630 churches, we've got a lot of experience actually we want to draw on and make the most of. So you'll notice there's no kind of big platform speaker this year flown in from somewhere else. I think there is some value in that sometimes. Someone coming in from outside can give you an objective point of view. And I think some of our strongest sessions in the past have been those kinds of speakers, but we haven't got that this year. That's deliberate. We want to have a bit of confidence in confidence in ourselves. That's come across the wrong way, so I don't mean it like that, but I think we have been given by the Lord gifts and abilities to use within our network, so let's use them.
Yeah, sure.
Now I've got one last thing to tell you about.
Oh, go on then. I was going to say.
And that is we are, instead of having seminars on the last day, we're going to have some extended prayer time. So prayer is a really important part of the conference. We normally have it at the start of the day, and we will do that on the Tuesday. But actually, what we wanted to do was just to say, if we're going to give ourselves to this work, if we're going to be committed to fellowship and being independent and being evangelical, to serving one another, to reaching out with the good news, it has to be bathed in prayer. We love our churches to pray more, and we can't do that if we as leaders are not praying. So we are scrapping the seminars that we would normally have if you won't remember. So the third set of seminars we would normally have had, we're not having those. Instead, we're having some extended prayer times. And we're going to split people up. I mean, you'll be able to choose which group you go to, but by kind of setting that you're in.
Okay.
So one of the things FIEC does is we gather people regionally in our local conferences or regional conferences, and that works well. And people have lots of regional connections, but you don't necessarily have connections with someone who's in the same kind of work as you. So, for example, if you're in Norwich, and you're a church which has got quite a lot of students in it, let's say, you've probably got more in common with a church in Exeter that's got quite a lot of students.
Okay, yeah.
Than a church just down the road which is in a village.
Yes.
So there's real value in local connections. We want churches to develop those, and many do, of course. But actually, there's great value in connections of different kinds. So we're going to split up. We're broadly going to have 6 or 7 groups. They're going to be something like city church, city centre church, suburban church, rural church, market town church,
Great, yeah.
church in a hard place, smaller church, church that's less than 10 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, you may think my church fits into 4 of those categories, and that's fine. Just choose one that's good for you. And you go and pray. Each of those will be led by one of our younger leaders from one of those kinds of churches who'll maybe interview someone and just give you some guidance for prayer. I'm just going to get on and pray. And I think that's a really important part, actually, of our meeting together. And I'm one of the things I'm most pleased about with this program is we've elevated prayer to have a more significant profile, really, which I think it needs to have in the conference. But actually praying with people who are in similar settings will not only give some shape and form to the praying, but actually it means maybe you go to, it's just before lunch, so maybe you go to lunch straight after with someone that you've just been praying with, and you'd be able to carry on those conversations.
Yeah. And a leader in a small student city in Norwich is very unlikely to be able to meet someone in Exeter, like other side of the
unless
country.
you go out of your way
to
to sort of search out those people. You're more likely just to say, well, who's local?
Yeah.
Now, of course, you might have other people local who are doing exactly the same thing as you, and that's great.
Yep.
But actually, there's a great value in hearing, someone who's doing village work in rural Suffolk is going to have lots of connection with someone who's doing rural village work in Derbyshire.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to put those people together.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity to do so.
Yep.
Anything else that you'd like to tell people why they should come? Why we'd like them to join us?
No, not really. I haven't sold it yet.
Covered it.
There's no selling it. I think it's great to sing with other people, isn't it?
Yes.
So the band from Cornerstone, Nottingham, are going to help us again.
Good.
So Colin Webster and Phil Moore and the guys there. So it's thrilling to sing together. One of the great things actually about getting together in those regional conferences last year was just singing together.
After a long time of not being able to do
what was
so
the
at all.
largest? Was London the largest?
I think so.
Was it Birmingham? So 300-ish, wasn't it?
I remember Birmingham particularly because we were doing the scratch band at the front.
We were.
People started singing, and I hadn't really heard singing very much. So from the front in that kind of the acoustic hall, it was just like wow.
Well, 1,000 people singing the praises of our God.
Oh, yeah.
I just think it's fantastic, isn't it? And that's not to make people think, I wish it was like this every week. We realise that when we gather together, it's not a church in the same way that our local churches are. In some ways, they're much more precious than a gathering of leaders. But it is, in some ways, a foretaste of what's to come.
Yeah.
That sort of singing around the throne that will come in glory. Oh, what a day that will be. Yeah.
So we've got great experienced speakers and seminar leaders helping us out. Different things for different types of leaders, not just pastors, leaders all through the whole church. Time to pray together, eat together, good Christian activities, sing together. Blackpool, maybe a new place. I've not been to Blackpool.
The Illuminations are quite magical.
Yeah.
I'm sort of I get slightly emotional about these things, but they're not normally on November the 7th to 9th. They're normally finished by then. But during lockdown, they put them on longer and discovered that people wanted to come and see us. So the great news is the 7th to the 9th of November, the Illuminations will be on.
Wow.
Which is one of the reasons we've called our conference Keeping the Lights On. See what we did there?
I like
it.
My
question for you is now, let's say you were back in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And you were working for Lincoln City Council as you did, doing all their PR, and you were serving in the local church in a leadership role. Would you want to come?
I would totally want to come.
That's the right answer.
Yeah. Well,
we're not just paying you to say that.
Well,
would you genuinely want to come?
I think so, because if you're involved in the local church, we know that the local church is so important, and this is a great opportunity to be able to enhance and develop and be able to do that more effectively. To help
come with a group of leaders as well from church. Yeah,
try and get a little date holiday. Get the kids off to the
parents,
the grandparents, and get a bit of leave from your work. Nice. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So everyone who's listening was probably going to think, okay, well, I need to book now, don't I?
You do, yes.
And
there is a deadline,
July,
isn't there?
I've got on my little notes. The 1st July is the deadline for the super early bird booking. So 1st July, it's going to be $195 for the whole lot. So that's the conference. That's food, not breakfast, but it's the lunch, 2 lunches and 2 evening meals. So that's the 1st July.
You do have to sort out your own accommodation, don't you?
Accommodation and travel.
And the reason we've done that is because there is a whole range of accommodation, from very budget to very expensive.
B&B on the beach.
Yeah, or an Airbnb or something. So actually, if you want to go share with people and go cheap, there are ways of doing that. If you want something that's a bit smarter, you can do that. So actually leaving the accommodation down to individuals is a way of us keeping the price down, but actually allowing you to flex it in a way that suits you.
And maybe do that extra night before or afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
To make the most of the opportunity. There's other deadlines down the line, September, October.
But 1st of July is the pressing one.
July, that's the one, yeah. fiec.org.uk/LC 2022, LC Leaders Conference.
Okay. LC 2022.
Okay, there. Or if you just go on the homepage,
it's there on the landing page, isn't it? Keeping the lights on.
And you just need to book up, sign up, and then we'll do the rest. We'll let you know
and
what
also,
you need to do.
I think, Joel, if you are a leader and you're listening to this, you're probably a pastor or a worker because you've got the time to listen to the podcast. I don't know. So do think about who else you can encourage in church to come along.
Yeah.
It could be a really significant moment for you as a leadership team to go away to reflect on some stuff. So we have heard stories of leadership teams who stay on for a day actually and have a day away,
Great.
just reflecting on what they've heard and learned. So do be thinking about who else you can invite along.
Yeah. And if you are working in a deprived area, we have bursaries available as well.
We do, that's right.
And there's a certain amount of bursaries that are available, so you can apply on that same page before you do the booking. You can apply for the bursaries. And if you do apply and you don't get the bursary, we can still give you the super early bird price later down the line. So we want as many people to be able to come as possible. Good.
I'm bringing my wife for the first time. So
wow.
Who's now a worker in a church. And because of the way that childcare has worked out, she's able to come this year. So not only will you be a newbie, my wife will be a newbie as well.
Great, we can stick together.
Yeah.
Celia. So thank you very much, Adrian, for letting us know.
Thanks, John.
All the stuff will be on the website as well. So hopefully you'll be able to share this. I hope you've found it helpful.
Good to chat.
Those who are listening and watching. It's been the Independence Podcast. I've been Joel. This has been
Adrian.
Yeah.
Yay.
Please rate and review the podcast and subscribe and share it. And that'd be really great. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks.